G'day. Today I'm going to talk to you about a bunch of Janome and Elna machines that all have the same way of selecting stitches and changing the width and length of said stitches. Let's get on with it. This is the part of the machine where you choose stitches and adjust them. The light is currently on next to the hash key, which indicates number. So we're looking at stitch number 1. And if we go down here, there's the hash key, number 1. It's a straight stitch, it's in the centre. And you can see over here that my needle is in the centre. To make this go to stitch number 2, I touch plus. I'm now on stitch number 2, and you can see this is also a straight stitch, but the needle has moved over to the left side. So 1 is in the middle and 2 is on the left. The same way that I can move from stitch 1 to stitch 2, I can keep going up through all of the stitch numbers. This machine has 50 stitches on it, which is why it's called a DC3050. If you are on stitch number 1 and you want to go to stitch number 50, the easiest way to do it is to go minus, and it all cycles around, and now it's on stitch number 50. So essentially that gives you the number of the stitch that you're on. You will notice that under the stitch numbers there's a picture of a foot, and that indicates which foot you're supposed to be using for each stitch. When I touch this key, it flicks me through, toggles me through these 3 areas. So I'm now looking at stitch width. Now I'm stitching length. Stitch 50. Let's go back to stitch 1. Well, there is actually some direct keys to get us to things. Stitch 1 there, and you can see stitch number 1. The width on this stitch is 3.5. Somehow that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. A straight stitch is a straight stitch. It doesn't have any width, but the width key is actually used for something slightly different on a straight stitch. You'll notice this is in the middle. If I go up here and I go to stitch number 2, we're on stitch number 2 now, and we now look at the width, it's 0, but they're both straight stitches. On a straight stitch, the width key changes your needle drop position. So from 0, my needle drop position is going across. It will still do a straight stitch. It stops at 7 because that's how wide this machine can go. It will still do a straight stitch, it's just that it's going to do it in a different position. So if we've got it on 7, it's there. When I take it back to 3.5, which is the one in the middle, it's there. And when I take it over to 0, so those are the needle drop positions for a straight stitch. Needle drop position will help you get the perfect 1/4 inch seam allowance for quilting. I also use it when I'm doing my quilt as you go method for allowing me to do top stitching on the tape that I put over my joins. It's really handy to be able to adjust that needle to exactly the right position that I want it in comparison to the presser foot. I'm going to go to zigzag now, which is stitch number 10, and we'll do a little bit of the default zigzag. The width on the default zigzag, when I bring it down here, is 5 millimeters. I will take that up as high as it will go, which is 7, and as I sew I'm going to reduce the stitch width. And you can see that was the default stitch. I went to as wide as it would go and then gradually brought the stitch width in. A zigzag with a stitch width of 0 is a straight stitch, but it really pays for you to know just how wide the zigzag on your machine can go. Janome and Elna have feet that are designed for machines that can do 5, 7 or 9 millimetre wide stitches. If you put the wrong size foot on your machine, there are two possible problems. The first one is that the foot will not match up with the feed dogs, so it won't pull the fabric through properly. And the other one is you might potentially have a needle go through a foot. It doesn't do it very well. They break. So know how many mils your machine can do. It's important. I'm going to take my stitch width back to 3.5, and now I'm going to do the same thing with this next one, which is stitch length. So I will take the length out as far as it will go, and then gradually as I sew I will bring it closer together. I ran out of bobbin thread, so I'm going to have to do this again. This was a length of 4, 4.5, and it gradually came down. The minimum I used was 0.4, and around there, 0.4 or 0.3, you get to a satin stitch. To get a nice satin stitch out of a zigzag, you need to have that length of the stitch vary depending on the kind of thread you're using. A thicker thread, like the one I was using there, you can't go much shorter than about 0.4. If you try to, the threads start bunching up on each other and they don't feed through the machine. If you're using a nice embroidery thread, that will be considerably finer, and then you probably need to go down to 0.3, maybe 0.35. It really depends. The reason you have to do that then is to get better coverage, otherwise you can see gaps in between the stitches of the fabric, and you don't want that in a nice satin stitch. Something else to remember about satin stitch is that you need things to be firm, and often that means putting some tear away or some other stabilizer under the fabric while you're working with it. This is not because the machine's doing something wrong. It's because that many stitches are going to pull the fabric up, and the softer the fabric, the more of a problem it becomes. So you need something to give some stability under the fabric. I spoke earlier about how the machine indicates which particular foot is meant for which particular stitch. You have complete control over the width and length of the stitches on your machine. We've just seen that, and we can change them for everything. However, the ones that have been built into the machine as the defaults are the ones that are intended for the specific feet. This foot has some metal wires in it. It is intended for doing over edge stitching. If you change the width of the stitch, there is every possibility that you could have the needle coming down into one of the wires and breaking. So you need to be particularly aware when you are using the specialised feet that you don't change the width and make it a dangerous situation. When I'm doing blind hem, I very regularly change the length of the stitch, but I don't change the width very much because that's where you start to run into problems. Length shouldn't be an issue. Width very definitely can be when you're talking about the specialised feet. Your machine may be a bit different in how it looks and how it selects stitches, but the Janome and Elna range is pretty consistent about how the width and length works, especially with regard to the needle drop position on a straight stitch. you can certainly change the width and length as you are sewing. But be aware there are some limits to what you should do with the width key, particularly if you're using specialised feet. Under those circumstances, hand wind through and just make sure nothing's going to get hit at anywhere in the stitch length. I hope you've learned something today, and I shall see you next time.